Hey VT, we're back, and today we're going to talk a little bit about tablet drawing in Adobe Photoshop. So Adobe Photoshop, and go to New, and just make a new document just so that we can experiment. So like tablet, play would be appropriate. And we'll just make this a US paper size document, 8.5 by 11 inches, 300 resolution is not entirely necessary. We could do 175. So hit OK. The new document is completely white and ready to go. What I usually do is I have a layer for drawing, and I use the brush tool. And some of my favorite brushes in here are some of the first brushes here. There's a lot of different styles of brushes, but for drawing, I'm going to use this first brush right here, one of my favorites, and I'm going to turn this way down to a small brush that is like 1, 2, or 3 pixels in size. One of the secrets to doing this is to zoom in. So that you're close enough to your paper. When you draw or when you write, you usually have your head pretty close, your face pretty close to the paper. So drawing really far away, like really zoomed out, is really difficult. It's like drawing with like your pencil attached to a broomstick, and like you're standing up and your paper's on the floor. So I like to zoom in. There are a lot of different styles of brushes, but I like this one for drawing. This one I usually keep the opacity up pretty high, and I'm going to use black. You can use any color you want really, but for starters I'm just going to use black. Couple different drawing techniques. One, when I draw, I like to shade using techniques like hatching. Sometimes I'll do cross hatching, which is crossing your hatch marks. So right now I'm just kind of scribbling. There's a technique called scumbling, which is more or less like a scribbling technique to produce the illusion of textures. So there's many different styles of scumbling. Just we're mark making right now, and the more marks you make, the darker you create a value that is darker. So the more marks, the darker the value. The less marks, the lighter the value. So something that is good to practice is with hatching, cross-hatching, and scumbling, can you get dark to light? So making more marks to less marks. Or even hatching, cross-hatching. And scumbling. Less marks, less value. More marks, more value. So we kind of layer up and add more marks to create darker, and add less to create less. So that's some good practice right there. Another technique that we'll employ today is a technique of painting. So if we take the same tool, the brush tool, I'm going to change my color to a darker color like and I'm going to increase my brush size a little bit. I'm going to pick a different brush this time. Maybe the second brush here, which is a flat brush. Maybe one of these guys up here. How about that one? Okay. What I like to do is that when I'm painting, I'll use opacities. So I'll turn down the opacity of my brush, and I'll use a soft brush. So the hardness of the brush is really hard right now. I'm going to turn that down. And this starts to become like the illusion of spray paint. And when you layer opaque, like lowered opacity, when you layer them up on top of each other. You just have to layer them to get the full opaqueness, the opacity. So what's cool about that is that you can do stuff like this. So one, I'm holding the brush down. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you see how you can start to create the illusion of a gradient with that. It's pretty interesting. Another thing that you can do is you can pick a color and you can paint and then not only that, but you can create gradients that shift from one color to another color. And by layering those colors, you start to get it kind of mixes in the middle and stays pristine on one side, so it's pretty cool stuff. So you can practice painting with color and creating gradients, values, and color shifts, things like that. And then lastly, the very last thing that we'll practice today is you can bring in photographs from wherever, your computer or the internet or whatever. So for instance, like cat on the internet. I'm going to bring in a cat. So I'll find a cat. Here's one right here. Wait, I like that one more. I'm going to right click on it and go to copy. And then I'll go to my Photoshop file. And go to edit paste. And there's my cat. I'm going to attempt to kind of trace this cat. What I like to do when I'm tracing, just so I can see what I'm doing as I'm doing it, is I like to turn the opacity of that layer down. So the cat came in on its own layer. Just turn the opacity of that down a smidge, say 70%. And I don't like to draw on the image itself. I like to draw on a separate layer. So now I'll make a brand new layer by hitting the new layer button right here. So this is going to be my drawing layer. Here's my photo. And here's my first drawings that I did. I accidentally did it on the background, which I don't usually like to do, but anyway, it's just practice. So I'm on layer 2 now. This is a layer that is above this cat. And now I'm going to use black. I'm going to do some of the details, some of the drawing stuff. I'm going to go back to using the brush tool, making sure that I'm using a tiny little brush, like a 2-pixel brush. I'm going to turn the hardness way up because when you're drawing, it's better to use a hard-edged brush. And I'm going to use this little guy. It's one of my favorite brushes for drawing. So, anyways, here I go. So now I'm on the page. I'm drawing with black. Oops, my opacity was way down. Forgot about that. Turn that back up. I think that brush is still a little big. I'm going to turn it down to 1 point. The good thing about this is you don't have to be great at drawing to be able to draw something. Things to think about is instead of just outlining everything, try to just look for the dark areas of the photo and try to mimic those areas with shading, cross-hatching, hatching, those things we were talking about earlier. On another layer, we can do the highlights. On another layer, we can do the colors, things like that. Right now, I'm just trying to kind of reproduce some of the textures and the values of the drawing. Going with the contour and not necessarily outlining. Not necessarily outlining anything, just kind of trying to put in some of the textures, some of the line work. Not necessarily, I'm breaking up any breaking up any outlines and stuff like that. I'm trying to refrain from just drawing an outline around it because that'll look very cartoonish, and that's not really what I'm going for. Outlining stuff and then just filling it in usually results in a more cartoon or comic sort of illustration, and that's okay if that's what you're going for, but I'm really trying to make this look kind of comic book. I'm trying to make it sort of realistic, so I don't want it to look too cartoon. Comic book illustrating, maybe. So I'm doing a lot of like cross-hatching inside this really dark area just to build up the value, instead of trying to just like fill it in. Like this isn't a line, so I'm just going to put in like some texture instead of trying to put in a dark line. And let's see what I got. So because I'm going to put the eyes in. Because I'm not trying to outline anything, and because I kept the two layers separate, I'm going to take the photo away.
Ooh, hey, where's my work on this thing?
So in keeping the lines kind of broken up a little bit and keeping the two layers separate, I was able to create the illustration of the cat's face. It's going to take some more time. I'm going to spend some time on it, make it better. But at any rate, this is a good way to practice. So have fun, and see you in your class.